Hey folks, Grant from GunSpot here for Tulster.com. Today we're going to be showing you the technique I use for drawing from the appendix carry position using my Oath holster from Tulster. In the appendix carry position as a right-handed shooter, I am just slightly to the right of my center line, and so I'm going to cover a two-handed technique that I use. Now, you aren't always going to have two hands, so that's a separate technique, but today we're just going to cover the two-hand technique. So the technique that I use is I start with my support hand. I'm going to reach across. Ideally, I want that support hand to be at least in front of where the gun is, okay? If I am a little bit further past it, even better, but when I don't get to the gun, I start running into problems where my shirt gets tangled up in the gun itself. So I'm going to reach across, I'm going to grab the shirt, I'm going to uncover the gun and then drag the shirt across my body. And why I'm dragging the shirt across my body is so that I don't get my gun hand thumb tied up into the cover garment, all right? Next, I'm going to move my hand to the gun, and what I want to establish before I just immediately pull the gun out of the holster is that I've established a good, strong hand grip. I don't want to settle for just hand on the gun, but I want a good, solid grip. And I tell people all the time, as you're practicing any kind of draw stroke, make it a stop position until you are consistent in achieving that grip. Don't just settle for halfway and fix it out here, because that's easy to do when nobody's fighting with you, when nobody's slapping at your hands trying to keep you from drawing that gun. But as soon as you accept it in the real world and thinking you can adjust safely, you're going to run into a lot of problems. All right, so again, I reach across, I uncover, I grip, I rip, I rotate the gun to the target, that support hand rolls into position, and then I press those sights out onto the target as high and in my plane of vision as I can get. Of course, as soon as my sights are on the target, I can prep the trigger and execute my shot if it's a valid threat. Next, I want to safely return to this third position of my draw stroke. In this position, what I'm doing is I'm teaching myself to be safe in returning the gun to the holster. I'm checking to make sure my finger is where it needs to be outside of the trigger guard. I'm ensuring that no other debris has entered the trigger area so that I can safely clear my cover garment, orient the gun back to the holster, and safely holster the gun without having an accidental discharge. That leads me to probably the biggest safety issue of carrying appendix is folks do not have that habit of built to take that pause, and they end up leaving their finger on the trigger because they've fired and they're just not in the habit of removing the finger off the trigger, and or they've got some other kind of debris like hoodie pole tie or bands off of a cover garment or something along that lines, you know, bungee cords out of a fleece jacket or whatnot, and they end up inside the trigger guard. And in cases of a GLOCK or similar style of striker fired gun, it ends up getting tangled or caught on the trigger and causes a discharge. So one of the things, in addition to normal good range safety habits that you can do to teach yourself how to safely reholster the gun, is you can actually remove the holster from the waistline and reholster your gun with your barrel pointed in a safe direction, and then the gun and the holster can be inserted back into your pants. And for those of you that are just starting out with appendix carry, or maybe you're new to concealed carry as a whole, that's probably the safest thing you can do as you're practicing your draw stroke so that you don't have an accidental discharge inside your waistline, which is obviously not a good thing. All right, so one thing I didn't cover in a great enough detail, I think, is at what point when you're drawing, either from appendix carry or strong side or back hip or whatever, but at what point should your finger enter the trigger guard? And so simply put, until you know where the sights are aimed, nothing should be inside the trigger guard. Remember previously I talked about a high sight press. Why I preach high sight press is so that as I'm drawing my gun, I can capture that front sight and begin bringing those sights into alignment. And as I do, as soon as I see the sights aligned, or in my case, a red dot in view, I can then move that dot to the target as I'm guiding it out and begin to prep the trigger so that when my arms reach extension, there's just that last little bit of trigger pull. And so that makes me faster in being able to execute a well-placed first shot. Don't just go out and put this in to live fire right off the bat. This is where dry fire really is well meant. You want to practice the prepping of the trigger in dry fire so that you're not having errant shots go into the dirt in front of you or through the ceiling or you know, in any other embarrassing or dangerous direction. So we want to practice that high sight press, guiding the sights out, and we begin to prep the trigger as soon as we're in control of where the sights are pointed. Hey folks, thanks for watching the technique that I use for drawing from appendix. And remember, train hard, your family deserves it.